lot has really happened when I come to on this sort of, I guess, path we call life. You know, giving it a label, spiritual journey, path of enlightenment, soul's path. And sometimes I feel like it kind of puts an artificial, because of course every concept does this. Every concept implies something because the word almost always has existed in some context before your physical existence, right? So a spiritual journey has existed way long before I've existed in this physical incarnation. And when I apply it to myself, of course, there is a little bit of a limitation. It requires I do things and not say things and not believe things and not, as most concepts imply inherently within the function of language. But this pathless path we call life that I'm on, it's interesting because there is an illusion of choice, but not of free will. I don't know how to say it, but like that your choices do matter in a sense. Your choices have a bit of consequence, have an effect. But what your choices can't do, is that they can't override destiny. See, we talk about free will versus determinism, but it's weird. You have to think about how reality works. So we have our ego identification, right? Our sense faculties, our ability to perceive, and the explanation we have about that interaction, what we call experience. And then we have the experience itself, the raw experience without all of that. And then you have the entirety of existence. Why would there be not even this economy with this argument? And this, sure, from a philosophical perspective, if you have a belief about, well, the universe or creation is created with intended purpose, and that purpose can be, maybe intuited or divined or experimented to find, and therefore we have choices to make, and those choices have a ultimate cosmic matter. But of course, that's post hoc. That's after you've lived a life. That's after you've gotten an ideology. That's after you've seen people come to explain it. That's not necessarily a continuous, for example, right? No matter what, where on the planet, language, culture, whatever, the experience of burning your hand on something hot, fire, stove, electricity, that is universal. Meaning that you can't really, like, every single human being will have that experience and will be able to confirm that experience forever, as long as there's human beings on maybe a planet, right? So the idea that, like, we can make an assumption or an argument towards free will implies that there is an experiential understanding of your choices mattering. Now, this doesn't mean there's not free will, but I want us to take it back to the understanding of what we think is happening when we say free will, as if we're free from consequence, or that we're free from restriction, or that we're free from limitation. Would that even come from? What does that even mean in terms of free will? Now, I'm rambling at this point, right? 4 minutes and I'm rambling. I haven't even gotten to the point. Really, what I want to talk about is the fact that through my thinking, how this relates to me. I'm going through this period where I'm focusing on healing my heart, dealing with my traumas, realizing that my default program is self-abandonment, self-hatred, and that the work to undo that, at first I thought, wouldn't align with the spiritual path, because you hear something in the spiritual path, the denial of the self, the letting go of the self. But I realized that you have to actually have a good developed self first and let go of it. The idea of being beggars can't renounce. If you don't have it, you can't renounce it. You only have to have, then you can say, no, I'm done, because renouncing isn't even refusal. Renouncing is the endpoint of a desire. A renunciate is someone who sees the desirous world and can enjoy this and internally feels there's no desire towards it, sees it as, if at best, lesser than whatever outcome they may get. In this case, we're talking about liberation, realization. For that to happen, two things. They have to be able to access those desires, and two, legitimately no longer want them. Which is why you can't just stop desire. What you have to do is you have to realize, it's not that these things no longer feel good, but you realize that internal push to do it is not nearly as strong as whatever is driving you towards the goal. But in that, it's already clear that both paths lead the same way. The person who's admired in the world and in desire will get tired of it, even if it doesn't take a lifetime. Sure, desires increase infinitely, but that infinite increase does something, right? It's not the desire gets fulfilled, it's that the realization of the bottomless pit of desire makes someone go. So you can see it as someone who reaches the top of a business. They get all the way to the top, they make all the money, they're the richest person, and they realize they don't really know what they were doing it for. They could make more money, they could find a new thing, but they've gone through enough experiences and they kind of can reflect after they've taken a period of stop the constant pushing. They've reflected and they're like, this could just happen indefinitely. There's no end to this. And with that, there's something about it. There's something about that to human beings when they, for example, are in conflict and they're constantly fighting and they pull just a little bit back. There's a little bit of reflection. It's almost like a micro meditation in which they can see that true self sees. That's so this can happen forever, or the end of it would just be total destruction, right? It's like, if we keep it going, we'll destroy each other. You see this in movies, right? Where sure, you may have your reasons, your pain, your trauma, proper justification, but you also can have just a bit of foresight to be like, but even that wouldn't mean that the outcome should happen. You almost will figure out that whatever you feel like you deserve isn't worth the cost, right? There's another understanding of desire where it's just like, sure, I desire this thing, but I know where that will lead. It's that intelligence, what they call the buddhi, that can discern. It's that discerning principle of something's wrong. They call it, the viveka, right? Determining the real from the unreal. And really, that's that understanding of there's something about this that doesn't make sense. Because I think in human minds, there's a beginning point, a middle point, and an end point. And that the infinite nature of creation sort of causes a dissonance. And that dissonance is what I think propels people spiritually. Again, I'm off track. But the reason I'm off track is really because I want to kind of explain that process is the process of spirituality that gets someone on the spiritual path and eventually enlightenment, because you do that again when you do enough meditation, enough practice, and enough things where you just realize, no, I don't need to, these become just tools. I get off the boat, but you don't stop rowing until you get there. But the funny thing is, I had the hubris of thinking, oh, well, I'll just delay my spiritual growth. And maybe I could delay it, maybe I could speed it up. But what ends up happening is when I find a new path, I still have the same background. Because for me, growing up, it was always about happiness. Even now, I realize that all the things I want are based in happiness or peace or joy. Even manifestation. I got to a point where I'm starting to manifest things. That manifestations just happen. I'm comfortable in knowing I can manifest whatever through the process of surrender, through the process of the Bashar formula. But it was a while ago that made me understand why I dropped manifestation. I talk about how I kept manifestation. And it was that process. It was that spiritual process of I learned all the techniques. I did practices. I visualized. I released resistances. I kept a positive attitude, and it worked. But it was a lot of work. It was a lot of mental energy. I was very exhausted and tired. Manifesting an apartment with no money, or very little money. Not no, I couldn't stay. Like, was able to get all the stuff done. Was able to. I manifesting away. Not like certain things I didn't get. Like, I tried to manifest a job, I didn't get it. At least it doesn't seem like it now. It seems like I'm getting it, right? So it's like all the things I can do, I can get it. But every time I would get the money, or I would get stuff, or I would get things, or even situations, there was a part of me that it was little by little. It was like, there's something missing. There's something missing. There's something missing. And it happened enough times where I'm like, no, there's got to be something more than just manifesting. Sure, I could take these techniques to the moon and make probably a lot of money. Something's missing. I know I'll be unhappy. And it's funny because that's what most people are in their spirituality. They're trying to manifest the things because they're at the level of that need. But I've gotten so used to it where I'm no longer in that survival mode idea. I got to deal with something else. And one of the things I'm dealing with now, dealing with is my emotions, my traumas, my self-doubt. You guys, you say I'm trying to manifest something different, in therapy and all that kind of stuff, and dealing with the fact that, sure, I can manifest. You can kind of manifest with the bad self-concept, I realize. It's so unsatisfying. I realize I don't just want the thing. I want to feel good while I have the thing. But the thing and me feeling good are almost mutually exclusive. But that too was the spiritual path, because now it what it does is it course corrects, right? The spiritual path is the course correction, but you got to understand why I said in the beginning that the life is the pathless path is because everything's a course correction. Even if you don't get it in this lifetime, not everyone understands that. Their life, they got to come back around. Some of us, I guess, are, you could say, lucky enough, or it's just old enough, or whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, that we go on a path and it's the wrong path, and eventually we can just feel it. It's something in our spirit that says, this isn't what I was looking for. So all the paths lead to one. Even the path of trying to deal with my depression and healing. Eventually, either I do the thing, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I go on to something else. Or I realize, oh, this doesn't actually push me forward. This just stunts me. So I stop and go to something else. But either one propels you forward. I guess you could say there are ways that are maybe more smoother. Maybe not faster, but smoother and better. And I think the better path is to follow your joy, your excitement, going as far as you can, leaving no expectations, staying in a positive state. The Bazaar formula. I think that is the smoothest. I think fast is our problem. Fast has become the sort of crux of the sort of Western mindset. Everything fast, but really it's about smoothness. Because smoothness does become speed. Smoothness becomes momentum. Momentum becomes speed. But the focus can't be the speed of the momentum. The focus has to be the smoothness, because that's where the momentum and the speed are the natural byproducts. I always feel like I was gonna blog, but I just ends up in a rant. This is my blog. I can't just talk about the intricacies of my life. I talk about it because I want to bring it on to something. Because my life, how do I put this? I'm going back to understanding more about the holographic universe. I'm doing a thing where I don't try to, instead of trying to find, I've realized that the same process, right? I'm done with novelty. Like, as a kid, I used to want to go back and forth, where I wanted to find new things. I wanted to really know the universe, know about science and religion and history, and you could, with every new thing, get lost in information. I was an information junkie as a kid, just because I was so curious about the world. But I'm in this phase now when I'm 30, and I've done this for such a long time that I've caught myself being kind of full of novelty itself, or at least with the breadth and width of information. And now I want to go to depth. And in those depths, I'm kind of going back and staying within a specific bubble, because those bubbles are really the edge of experience. So you have spiritual, metaphysics, quantum realities, quantum science. I'm kind of staying at those peripheries, but really I'm trying to dig down deep. So I'm retracing a lot of the old and of sort of, psychology, right? Spiritual psychology, metaphysical psychology. So those are the things I guess you say I do the most. And I'm digging down deep. So I'm going back to the old stuff I read for the last 3 years, and actually trying to sit with, understand them. And one of the things I'm kind of coming back to is the holographic universe, or the idea that the universe is actually a composite reflection or a projection of a more base reality that projects what appears to be a physical universe, so a hologram. And now how a hologram works, or at least how a picture hologram works, a specific hologram works, is that when you cut the source material or the picture, the projection still has all of whatever is projected, the entire hologram within that piece, just distorted, not complete. Why I say this, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I actually? So this is cool, and this must be meaningful, because if all of the universe exists in part, all whole exists in the part, that means when they say you are the universe, that's what they mean. That because the universe is holographic, and you are in the universe, you are the whole universe. And for me, it's like, okay, but practically, what does that mean? That sounds cool as fuck. But what do I do in my daily lives? Well, it's the same. See, we think it's different. I think this is different from. I'm reading The Mastery of Love by a Nagual from Mexico, where it's talking about the emotional body, the heartbreak, the sort of mental projections in our heads that we place on relationships, rather than the actual actionable steps within relationships, and how to actually change your fundamental perspective on love, relationships, and particularly yourself. It's the same thing, because if the universe exists within me completely, then whatever I'm going through is reflected into the universe. What they say, well, what you see in the world, you're seeing in yourself. It's because of the holographic universe. So the chaos and the war and the gender wars and the patriarchy and what I see online, I can complain about, or I can spend the time to understand my universe and then fix it from within. So I guess you could say, we say as a human being, well, are we nothing? Are we worthless in the grand scheme of it? Are we just specks? From the holographic universe perspective, you don't necessarily need God to say, oh, well, no, God has specifically and specially favored you above all the creation for you to be special. Simply that, well, you are not just connected to the whole universe, you are the entire universe. So it very much matter, as much as everything else is also the entire universe. It matters. But that also means even your little problems matter. But they matter into such a way where only you, being the universe, can deal with it. So what that brings to me is that, okay, well, dealing with my self-hatred is fixing whatever problems exist in the universe. If I find them problems within me to fix. The whole you are God, you are one, da da da. But what does that mean? What does it mean that you are Brahman or you are God? What does that mean is you control your own reality? What does that mean functionally? It means that for me, dealing with and healing my trauma and processing my trauma is the same path as evolving spiritually, right? Spiritually evolving into a new realm or beyond into ultimate reality, what we consider ultimate reality, or getting beyond the illusion, getting Maya. It is salvation. It is the process of enlightenment. Right? Not enlightenment itself, but the process of untangling to, I guess you could say, receive or understand enlightenment. It's the work. Yeah.